Hello and welcome to another short drawing lesson. This week somebody asked me how to draw a Pagani Huayra, but in perspective rather than in the usual profile views that we do. And that's not really something that I can tell you how to do step by step. Just because to draw something in perspective you need to all be working to the same perspective grid, and that's not really possible to explain through the internet. But what I can do is show you what skills you need to be able to tackle something like that yourself. So the first thing you need to know is how perspective works, and I've done a series of videos on that which I'll link above and at the end of the video. Once you know how perspective works, you'll also need to be able to put that into practice. And the first step, once you think you understand perspective, is to start drawing some simple forms, maybe things like rectangles that just feel like they might be perspective cubes. You see these lines all radiate and would eventually flatten out if you went high enough. This object's bigger at this end than that end. You know, there's a little bit of tapering going on because of perspective. And you just want to be able to draw cubes, cylinders, pyramids at any angle and any degree of distortion that you want. Once you can do those, the next step would be to start learning how to draw through. And drawing through means to think about your object as if they were 3D wireframes, I suppose, is the easiest way to explain it. So here's a center line projected onto that box. Now, if we wanted to change the shape of the box, like maybe add a curving, sloping nose section to it, take our center line, droop it down at an angle, join it to the bottom there, add a couple of curves, and now we've got a sloping, curving nose to our box. We could add a kind of fin shape to the back there, and I obviously need to draw another fin this side, but I'm not going to guess. In my head I'm thinking, well, this curve starts here, so according to our perspective grid it should start there on the other side. And if we had a fin on the back, that again would need to correspond to the rest of our grid. So eventually this sort of becomes second nature, and you've got this three-dimensional form in your head all the time. So every time you draw a line on your object, it kind of, you know what angle to put it at. It might feel a bit abstract to start with, but eventually it will just be second nature. And if you want to add some wheels to your shape, you again need to know how much to tilt your ellipses by, which again I've explained in a video. Your minor axis of your ellipse also needs to correspond to your grid that you've set up, whatever angle that might be. So all of these things you'll just pick up the more you do them, once you know the basic rules. So if you've got a headlight here, the axis for that would head off in this direction. You probably wouldn't see one on the other side. If you did, it'd be a tiny slither. If you wanted to add a stripe to your car, you could do that. You'd have to work out where the center is of your fin, if it goes on the fin. So those are the skills you need. You need to understand perspective and the concept of drawing through, so that you start to get this three-dimensional form in your head as you draw. So you're drawing in 3 dimensions rather than just drawing flat curves on a flat piece of paper. Once you can do that, we could perhaps tackle something like a Pagani. Let's get my reference picture up. So for that, it's obviously a much more complicated shape than the one we just looked at. But I'm going to simplify it, start with the big shapes, ignore the little details to start with, and just do everything I can to just have a simple framework that I can hang all the other bits on top of. So I think the simplest part of this would be the shadow. So if you're looking at the top of the car, you've got a curving pointy front, and then it's a rectangle with a slight curve at the back. It's basically a rectangle with a pointing front. So that's what I've done here. So our if we had a centre line, it would be kind of there. So here's our curving front. So once I've got that, that kind of tells me where the bottom of the car would be, and I could sit some wheels on it. That might be a good starting point. So again, remember the axles for those wheels need to correspond to our perspective grid. I'm drawing everything really lightly because there's a good chance I might need to correct some bits. Now we've got that, we could perhaps do our nose shape, which there's a big kind of overhanging air intake thing under the nose here. Probably made my shadow a bit too pointy, so I'll correct that slightly. Next, we can start thinking about the main character lines of the car. So we've got a big curving shape that runs over the front wheel, dips down, bulges out at the back. Something like that. This is one of those curves that's repeated on the other side. So it's quite hard it's quite easy to transfer a simple straight shape from one side to the other, but a curving shape that curves in every direction is a bit trickier. But the curve will be fairly similar. A lot of this curve won't actually be visible in the final thing, but it's good to think about where it would be. So the high point here needs to be the high point on the far side of your car as well. Next, we could think about where the side window is. The side window's got a very kind of distinct sort of teardrop shape like that. Sort of leans in quite a bit, which makes it a bit trickier. If you draw 70s American cars with nice square sides and square windows, they're much easier. And then we've got quite a thick window surround, which tape runs off to the back of the car. So this pillar we could carry across to the far side and repeat it. It would probably be obscured by the glass, but it's good to know where it would be. Next, we could probably take our centre line of the car up the bonnet, because that will give us a good idea of where the lowest point of our front windscreen should be. We've got a sort of curving front. We know that this is the lowest point, and then it goes back to meet our pillars. We've got a kind of cylinder shape here, which becomes the rear lights. You won't see much of the back of the car because it curves inwards, so the wheels would hide that. The good thing about learning to draw cars or any objects like this with constructing them in 3D means that you're not sort of a slave to your reference anymore. You can change the angle slightly, draw it from a higher angle, or rotate the car a bit. Otherwise, you're just endlessly reproducing photos, which is no fun. Next, we've got a couple of headlights here, little elliptical things. And again, rather than just guessing where they should be on this side, I'm going to think, well, where are the bottoms? And they would carry across to over that side there. One of them's almost on the edge there. So if you guess them, sometimes you'll put things in the wrong place and it will just make the 3D feel of your drawing will disappear. We've got another couple of feature lines. We've got a sort of swoop runs over there, which gives you a space for an air intake here. There's another one at the bottom of the car, sits beneath the first air intake. So notice how I started with the really big shapes and then worked my way down to the smaller stuff. We've got a kind of V shape on the front there. And there's a air intake there. Got a little scoopy thing there. Got some wing mirrors. Again, the base of the wing mirror is here. Take it across using a perspective. Add the one on the far side. And that's pretty much it. That's a good basis. You know, it hasn't taken too long. And that would be a good starting point for a more tidy sketch of the car. You could, if you're working digitally, make this bit fainter and do a tidier one over the top. If you're working like I am with pen, you could just start to firm up some of the lines or put it under some layout paper and draw a cleaner one over the top. You see that curving line that we added on the far side of the car? You would see that through the windscreen. So it's definitely worth having. Old cars are definitely a lot easier to draw than these modern supercars that have lots of complicated curves and lines and things. These shut lines of doors, they're really useful at describing what shape these sides and things are. Right, that's probably enough for now, but hopefully that's given you a good insight of how you would tackle something like that. Like I say, you do need to learn your perspective and drawing through and put it into practice before you tackle something like that. But it's a really useful thing to be able to do because, it's like I say, essentially it allows you to draw anything from any angle. Hope you enjoyed that. Have a great week, and I'll see you for another one soon.